Hi everybody, welcome to the next video lesson with Seth. I hope that your practices are going well. I hope that you're practicing. Even if you're practicing just along with my videos, that's a great thing. If you're able to also practice without my videos, if you've kind of internalized some of the teachings, and sometimes you're just able to sit and go through the steps yourself, that's also a really great thing when you become independent in your practice, right? That's really helpful. So today I gave a meditation class in Boston, and one of the participants asked me about having a really busy mind. She said, she's never really meditated before, but the time that she's tried it, her mind was really overactive. What should she do? And this is kind of part of a bigger question, and I thought this would be a good place to talk about it with all of you, because that's what happens when we sit down to meditate usually. Is we sit down to meditate, right? We'll close our eyes, we'll relax, we'll start breathing, and we'll start kind of coming down. And often what happens then is that the mind starts thinking, that there's this overactive part of the mind that starts running and coming up, and we're thinking about things from our day, we're thinking about things that we have to do, thinking about things that already happened. Sometimes we go off into fantasies about things that have never happened and never will happen. The mind just kind of goes off on its own and entertains us, or kind of acts out our wishes, right, in kind of this movie of a fantasy, right? So the mind has all these different directions that it can go in, and especially the overactive part of the mind, the thinking mind, that's really an important one, because I think these days especially that's something that a lot of people have trouble with. So when the Buddha gives talks, he often would mention that everything has a cause. Right? Everything that has arisen arises from a cause. And it's important to see that cause, to understand that cause, and then to be able to shift that cause so that you can get the proper results. So if we look at the overthinking mind, the mind that's always kind of going, we have to, instead of sitting in meditation, kind of battling against these thoughts, trying to force our mind to stay here and get rid of these thoughts, we have to really kind of go in and see, what is the cause of this? Why is it happening? One of the examples that I really like giving was given to me through an experience. I was actually at a Vietnamese New Year festival in our monastery, and my teacher had me sit down, and they're making food and there's all these preparations, and there's this large pot of soup, and he asked me to stir the soup. So I said okay. So I sat down and I stirred the soup, and I was just stirring it and watching the water spin. And after a while I was noticing that, the faster that I would stir, the faster the water would spin. If I would slow down, then it would, slow down as well. And if I took out the spoon, that the water would keep spinning, but slowly on its own accord come to a stop. And I had this really kind of beautiful insight that I still use to this day, that in that moment I was really being shown karma. That if we are thinking, if we're being really active with the mind, if we're investing in the voices in our head, and we're really going with that momentum, as soon as we stop to meditate, that momentum is going to keep spinning. And only when we have kind of given it enough of the opposite, is pulled out the spoon and let it rest, after a little bit of time it can slowly kind of slow down and then stop all by itself. I actually asked my teacher afterwards, I was like, did you know that was going to happen? And he smiled at me and said, actually, that kind of soup doesn't need to be stirred. So that's a Zen master for you. But when I took physics, what I also saw was that there's different forces that are happening around us in the universe. And there's this law that a force will continue, a body will continue in motion until it's acted on by an equal and opposite force. Right? So if we're spinning the mind and then we stop thinking, we sit to meditate, and the mind keeps running, what is that equal and opposite force that's going to bring the mind to a stop? What's almost creating that friction that slowly brings it to a stop? And the friction that slowly brings the mind to a stop, it's actually contentment. When the mind feels like it's in a pleasant and a present place and it gets content, it kind of stops all by itself. It kind of just rests right here. And when I was talking to this woman in the class today, I kind of was reflecting on all of this, because I gave her a little bit of a teaching on how to meditate and these different directions to go in. But if I was really to look closely and I could see what she was really asking. It's how do I stop my mind? And what that really means to me is how do I make peace with the present moment? Because when we're at peace with this moment, the mind automatically stops. If you think about the times in your life that are the happiest, the most peaceful, whether you're in nature somewhere, or you're with somebody you love, or you're eating a great meal, or something happens, a quality that they share is that you're extremely present in the moment in a very natural way, right? Because you can also be very present in the moment if there's like a car accident, right? But it's not this like natural feeling of like, I'm here. It's this feeling of horror that you don't want to be there. There's this horrible kind of rip where the mind wants to get away, but you're forced to be there, and that's why it's so traumatic. It's because you're forced to be somewhere you don't want to be. Whereas if you look at when the mind really relaxes, I was just at the beach last week, and you really see how you just are naturally there and you're happy to be there, and it's this really pleasant, recharging kind of feeling that you're just where you want to be, and the mind is just happily there, and I'm not getting lost in all of these thoughts. My mind's not busy at all. It's the opposite. It's very slow moving. It's very relaxed. One of my philosophy teachers said that he used to hang out with a lot of guys from Jamaica, and he said something about the guys from Jamaica is that they walk incredibly slow. And he's like, I would walk as slow as I could, and these guys would still be walking slower than me. And he was saying they're just so relaxed, And there's something about that when we're relaxed, we do everything more slowly because we're just here, that everything's okay. Actually, when I was in Fiji, about 15 years ago, they would always tell us there's this thing called Fiji time, right? So they'd come and pick us up on boats, and they'd say, we'll be there like 3 o'clock Fiji time. And 3 o'clock Fiji time meant anywhere between like 1 and 6. And it's because, you're in this place, the water is 80 degrees, the sun is out, the air is 80 degrees, it's beautiful. Nobody's really trying to get anywhere in a rush. So even if it's like 3 hours early or 3 hours late, it doesn't matter because it's just pleasant right now, and it's pleasant when they get you, and it's pleasant when you're there. And whatever you do, it was kind of just pleasant, so they don't really need to make these strict time rules because everything's already okay. So when I spoke to this woman in the meditation, and I kind of felt into it, and this is in Boston, and there's a lot of kind of, you have to go, and there's a lot of stress and a lot of time kind of constraints and a lot going on. I really felt, for the average person living in our society in a big city, or probably even not in big cities, is that you always think that there's something to do and something that you should be doing. That you really feel like you have to make it, like you have to strive, like you have to be successful. You have to make the best use of your time all the time and do everything right and achieve. And then there's also the very real pressures of financial debts, and also everything's just expensive. So this feeling like I have to achieve and be successful even for like my survival somehow, right? So it feeds into that. But what I could see by looking at this person was that her mind is going because there's something in her that thinks this present moment is not okay. That on some level she feels that there's something wrong in this present moment. That if she just stopped, it's like, I don't know what, like the world would end around her, or that, she'd be failing somehow, or she'd be missing the opportunities that she's supposed to be grabbing, or, there's something in us when we're in that mindset where we're just going, doing, you wake up in the morning, you drink the coffee, you go to the gym, you get going, you do your work, you're very successful, you're achieving, very kind of boom, like next. It's a great way to live in a lot of ways. It feels really good. But what I said to her is, imagine a Roman soldier, and he puts on all of his armor, and he gets his shield, and he gets his sword, and then he goes out to war because there's a war to fight, and he fights in the war, and he wins, and he does great. And then he comes home, and he sits down at the kitchen table with his wife and his kids, and he's still got the armor and the sword on. How is he going to eat his food? How is he going to hug his kids? Yeah, what if he wants to shower? Imagine him wearing all that armor trying to get into bed. Yeah, it doesn't work. And so it's really good if we're able to get ourselves into that achieving mode, if we're able to kind of do, create, be really successful, be really active and proactive, and make the most of all of this time and these moments in our lives. And simultaneously, we have to know when to put that down, because she said to me that she can't sleep at night because it keeps running. And if you look at that, it's because even when it's now time to rest, we can't rest because we've built up this momentum to go and go and go and do. And a lot of people have trouble sleeping at night, actually, because a lot of people have difficulty switching modes. They have difficulty putting down the sword and the shields and the armor, putting down all of these tools and mechanisms that maybe people used to get through their daily lives, but it actually doesn't serve you all the time. And if you were to look really closely at the mind, what the mind is doing during those times, it's always in a state of doing, which again is good, but it's never really taking time to drop in with itself. You're never really taking time to feel, how am I doing? Do I even want to go in this direction, right? There's that saying, you've gone up the ladder only to realize it's been leaning against the wrong wall, right? That's what midlife crises are, is that we go and go and do and achieve and, shoot down this direction, and then we get to be, 50 years old, 60 years old, and then we kind of look around and we're like, what the heck have I been doing? What life have I been living, and why? What is this all about, actually? And so it's really important for us to take those moments whenever we can to drop in with ourselves to see where we're at. Thich Nhat Hanh says, try to live every day in a way that you don't lose yourself. Yeah, live every day in a way that you stay connected, that you remember yourself, right? That you can be going and doing and be out there, but you also have to stay connected to that feeling of well-being, that feeling of centeredness, that feeling of like everything's okay. And out of that place of everything being okay, I'm doing things. A lot of us, unfortunately, our entire life is built around the feeling that everything's not okay. Yeah, and honestly, if you look at society, we live also in a pretty unhealthy, unbalanced world, right? It moves much faster than we want to move. A lot of the food that we eat is really not that great for us. A lot of the technology and the things that are filling our heads is not necessarily making us feel happy or relaxed or, kind of in a good headspace. We're not living in tune with nature. Yeah, we have artificial lights, right? So we kind of have created this virtual world that we live in, right? We live in homes and boxes, right? So we're very separate from nature, which is our natural kind of biorhythm. If any of you ever go camping or you go outside in nature for a while, it's why it's one of like the number one things that, helps people that are feeling anxious or depressed or, being in nature, connecting back to the natural rhythm of life and realizing, oh, I'm part of this, right? I'm not alone and isolated. I'm part of a bigger system of things. It gets us back into balance, because the world that we live in, it's running at a pace, and it's filled with a lot of different elements that are not natural to us, that really bring us out of our balance, out of our center, out of our middle. So if you do nothing, so to say, if you just go with society and go with culture, you will naturally be dragged away from yourself. You will be dragged out of yourself, right? And that's why things like this are so important, like having these talks and these videos and the meditations, right, that come after, is because we're at a place now, a place in history or whatever in humanity, that you actually need to do something. It requires work to get back into a place of balance, right? You have to sign up for a class with me and sit and watch a video to be like, oh, okay, now I can get back, right? It's not like maybe a couple thousand years ago is maybe more natural. People lived outside, people worked more with their bodies, right? We were more present. But right now we're kind of living very, very out of balance, too much in our heads. And we'll also notice that, the amount of thinking and overthinking you do, I've seen for myself anyway, it's directly related to how much I feel connected to my body. Yeah, which is an interesting one if you think about it. If you feel really connected to your body, right? If you feel connected to your body, your mind is actually more stable. Your mind is a little bit slower. The times that my mind is racing, times that I'm totally like in my head, I actually don't feel my body anymore, right? Which is why they often say, right, go to the gym, move your body, get a massage, jump in the shower, go swimming, do something to move yourself to get back in touch with your body. And that often takes care of a lot of the problems, the overthinking. And in Buddhism, there's walking meditation. So even the Buddha, he didn't just sit the whole time to get enlightened. He also did walking and then sitting and walking and sitting. And he knew that you also need to use the body in a way that starts to bring the mind in, right? That starts to connect us back to this thing that we're in, right? To ground us in a physical way And from that place, like a mountain, it's nice and stable and solid, and from that place we can drop in, right? So it's important to really look at these causes of the restlessness of the mind, right? Too much on your phone, too much in a virtual place, not connected to your body, a lot of stimulation. You can get whatever you want as soon as you want it. You can get rid of things that you want as soon as you want it, right? Lots of information, lots of light, different things coming in. So a lot of, even just the iPhones itself, right? A lot of stimulation for the mind, a lot of shifting us out of ourselves and out of our bodies. And if you just look at the natural flow of society right now versus the natural flow of the world, you'll see again society is moving much faster, faster paced, kind of very frenetic, and also it creates almost like inherently in its structure a feeling like something has to be done, right? We have to save the world, we have to do something about the government, we have to, there's always something that has to be done urgently right now. And it really creates this feeling like the present moment, it's almost threatening, right? We feel threatened by the present moment. And if you also kind of take that back into your life, I know when I was a monk and I started trying to meditate, what started coming up was all of the things in my life that I had never dealt with. All of kind of these memories, all of these traumas, all of these different things that I personally had never really gone through and processed. All of those things were coming up. And I had to work through all of that stuff to slowly find my peace in the present moment. So also, when we stop, we're faced with kind of how far off track we've gotten, right? How far away from ourselves we've gone. And then it's that path back to ourselves. Yeah, so meditation, it's really just that. It's that path back to ourselves, to feel okay in ourselves, to feel stable in ourselves. When the Buddha taught Buddhism, what we call Buddhism now, when he taught the Dharma, he said Sila Samadhi Panya, right? And Sila, it's that virtuous behavior, right? It's that way to live in the world that's more harmonious, that we feel good, that's more uplifting, that we're not harming anything, we're not harming ourselves, we're creating great energy around us, we're creating great energy in ourselves, we're living in an uplifted, inspired, happy way. And then Samadhi, that's the meditation. So from that place of changing the way that you live, then your mind starts to get ripe to drop deeply into meditation. And then Panya, the last part of that is because Panya means wisdom. When the mind is really present, it can see things clearly, and it starts to learn, right? We start to get insights by seeing clearly. So if you really look at your life, Sila Samadhi Panya, a lot of people were trying to jump right into the Samadhi, the absorption of the mind, trying to jump right into the meditation. And it's not working, we don't understand why, and a lot of people, they just give up, or they say, I can't meditate, right? As if meditation is something some people can do and other people can't do. And I've taught meditation to thousands of people across the world, many of them children, and I can tell you that every single person can meditate, right? It's not like some can and some can't, it's just that some have been living their lives in a way that their mind is already kind of more here and more accessible, and they can drop in an easier way. There's some people that have been building up such momentum, they've been stirring that soup so vigorously that when they stop, everything keeps spinning and moving and shaking, and then they say, okay, it's not for me, my mind's like a mess, right? And nobody's mind is a mess. All of our minds follow the same nature, it's the same structure of things. It's just, what are you doing within that structure? How are you using it, right? It's not like some people's soup can stop and some people's soup can't stop. It's like, no, everyone's soup can stop if they stopped stirring it, right? If you pull out the spoon and let it sit, let it rest. So something that we can do for our meditation practice is, as we're sitting, and if we're noticing that our mind is really busy and it's giving us a hard time, we can slowly into our daily lives start building a little bit more presence in, right? We could slowly find ways to maybe stop running away from situations or stop running towards things. We can maybe find ways to take a few deep breaths every now and then, right? Feel our body stretch out in between activities. Find ways, just little kind of drops throughout the day that we can just kind of arrive back in our body, take a breath, reconnect to yourself, and say, okay, and then go on to the next activity, right? So to kind of just slowly start reconnecting over time and living our lives slowly in a way that makes us feel better about ourselves, living our lives in a way that, when we stop, we're happy to be here. Yeah, and that's really something for everybody to look at. How can I live my life in a way that makes me feel happy to be here? Yeah, and that's a process that takes time. That's like step by step by step. For a lot of us, that seems overwhelming. Some of us haven't been like fully happy in like a decade, right? But to slowly start working in that direction, to set that as the true north on our compass and start working towards that. Like, what does actually happiness mean for me? What does it look like for me in my life? What can I start shifting? What little things, concrete things, can I start shifting to move myself in that direction? We'll also find that automatically and naturally in our meditation, we're happier. But we also go deeper into the meditation because we're happy to be here. And simultaneously in our daily lives, we'll just feel happier, right? We'll feel more peaceful wherever we are because they're kind of connected. They bleed into each other. So the other thing is that in the meditation itself, and we'll do the meditation soon, so the next video is the meditation. When you're meditating and you realize that your mind is going, know that that is a product of dissatisfaction. That is a product of wanting something else, wanting to be somewhere else, wanting to do something else, wanting to break away from something, wanting a situation to change or to be resolved, or on my grocery list or whatever's going on. You know, that's a product of the mind on some level, thinking that there's something wrong with just being here, that there's something to do, something to fix. And if you're meditating and that's coming up and you start fighting against your thoughts, or you stop, I shouldn't be thinking, I'm here to meditate, you're going to just create more of the same, because you're creating now more discontentment, and you'll start to get tighter and tighter and tighter and more frustrated. So really the key to all of this, and again, the meditation is the way to start training that part of your mind that then you can bring it into your daily life as well, is that as you're sitting and you realize you're thinking, if you know that this is a symbol of discontentment, the mind going, then in the moment you just feel yourself and you feel, okay, like, how do I get back to that place of contentment, right? How do I reconnect? And that's why I say often, if you find that you're thinking, your mind is going, then just come back, breathe, relax, feel like the part of your body that feels the best right now. Feel in this moment, where is my relaxation? In this moment, where is contentment? In this moment, where is my rest? So when I myself meditate, I sit down to meditate, I close my eyes, I relax, I start breathing, my mind goes up and it starts kind of doing its thing, and I feel the space around me, right? I like feeling the space around me. It feels very kind of relaxed and peaceful, and there's nothing kind of going on. So I'll feel the space around me, and the mind's kind of jumping and jumping and jumping, but I'm paying more attention to the space. Yeah, the mind is trying to yap in my face, but I'm really not paying much attention to it. I just feel the space around me. And slowly all of the attention starts to shift to that place, and this yapping mind, it starts to kind of fall away into the background somewhere, and the space starts to kind of come in, right? And then I start to feel more relaxed, I start to feel more at ease, I start to feel more present, and then the mind starts to really be here, and it starts to like being here, and it's like this reminder, oh yeah, this present moment actually feels great, oh yeah, it's actually fine to be here, oh, this is actually what I wanted the whole time. Through all those thoughts, I was trying to control something to get to that place where everything was okay. If only I could do all of these things, then everything will be okay. But the truth is, everything is okay. Everything has always been okay, actually. So you have to just relax and be with that and trust that, and start to retrain the mind, retrain the focus, to really be here, to be present with what's here, to not engage in the part of the mind that you don't want, right? Not engage in the sick part of the mind, as it were, but just to stay with the healthy part of the mind, the part of the mind that knows the truth, that everything's okay. And then the other parts of the mind will start to kind of get on board with that. You'll start to collect, and that's what meditation is, when the mind collects together, right? Instead of being a scattered, frenetic mind, it collects into one place, and it drops. And that becomes really relaxing, really peaceful, it feels great. And then you slowly start to learn things, right? Then there's the insight. You start to learn how good this feels, that this is what I want, that this is always accessible. Yeah, you start to understand yourself deeper. All of these different realizations and insights start coming up. You'll all have your own, I'm sure. So it's really just important for you to know that even if when you drop into meditation and your mind is a very non-meditative mind, that doesn't matter. It doesn't matter kind of how far you are in the wrong direction, as long as you know how to get back to the right direction. Which means that even if your mind is going really crazy when you sit down to meditate, if you just sit and focus on the space, focus on the body, right? Focus on the breath, smile, right? Feel that it feels good to sit here. You start focusing on contentment. Start focusing on everything being okay. Start focusing on enoughness, right? This is all good enough. This feels good, right? If you start changing your focus, the mind will start to abide. It'll start to kind of come and be a part of that with you, right? And it'll start to move away from that scattered frenetic, the spinningness of the soup. It'll start to all settle down, right? It'll start to drop and it'll start to feel really nice. And once we get to the present moment, then you've kind of reached this plateau where now you're back and you're breathing and it's fine and it feels good. And that's when you can just give a little nudge and you can just feel a little bit more precisely the breath, right? Once we're not totally scattered, if you imagine like a funnel, right? So once we've kind of got past the totally scattered part, and then you come in and then you're back just like in a neutral place and it starts to feel good, that's when then you can direct the mind a little bit to say, okay, this feels really good, so let me drop even more into what feels good, right? What's the best feeling? Is it my smile? Is it the peacefulness of my breath? To then start almost like microscoping the mind in, to really start focusing in on something, not with force, not by pushing it, just with intention, right? Just with the intention of just slowly bringing the mind deeper in. And if you do it too quickly or too hard or too intensely, the mind's going to react and try to get away, right? So it's all kind of the skill. It's like the art. It's like, how do I slowly kind of coerce my mind in the right direction that it doesn't react and freak out and try to get away? How can I do it in a way? How can I kind of herd the mind in that it kind of goes with? Yeah, and that's all like how meditation's an art. That's the art part of the meditation. That's the skill. How can I get my mind to go where I want it to go without it feeling like it's being forced or pushed, which will make it kind of run away? And the way to do that, like I've said, it's by giving it that good feeling, right? Is that you sit and you breathe and it feels really good, and then you say, oh, what else feels good, right? Investigating a little bit. What else feels good? What else feels peaceful? What else is subtle right now? Where's the most subtle part of my breath? What's the most subtle part of my experience that I can go into and enjoy and be with? And kind of just gently bringing the mind into that place through our intention, through curiosity, through a good feeling. And slowly the mind will start to come in, and eventually that meditation, that deepness, that'll become sustained, right? Right now you're applying yourself to that. But eventually that actually becomes sustained and it stays in that spot even without you. That you'll eventually get to a spot where the mind just stays really deep and you're not putting any effort. And the more you let go, the deeper it drops, and then it drops and it drops and it drops. So meditation, it's also really this process of letting go, of allowing, of unfolding. Eventually to meditate, letting go of even trying to meditate or wanting to meditate. Eventually the meditation itself starts to happen when you are not there. Yeah, when there's no you trying to do stuff, when the ego lets go, the sense of self lets go, the meditation happens all by itself. Yeah, so the Dalai Lama, he said once something along the lines of, if you turn on a light in the room, there's light, then there's no darkness. But if you turn off the light, as the light goes, the darkness comes back, right? So light and dark can't exist in the same time, in the same place, right? One takes over the other. And you'll start to realize in the deeper levels of meditation that the willpower, the ego, that sense of self, the thinking mind, all of these things are inhabiting the same space that the meditation inhabits. So only as those things start to move away, the space that's left becomes meditation. As the doing, as the trying, as the willpower, as the wanting and not wanting, and all that stuff and the thoughts, as all that stuff starts to fall away, right in that same place that it was, becomes this peace, becomes the space, becomes the meditation, right in that same spot. Yeah, so you're not going anywhere, you're actually letting go of things that were there. And right in that spot, that vacuum starts to fill with peace and openness. So in our practice today, in the meditation that we're going to do, we're really just going to practice that step of, as we're sitting here and we notice that we've gone off somewhere, just see what feels good to come back to. Give the mind something that it wants to come back to, right? What can I let go of? What can I focus on? What can I pull the mind into? These are all these different conditions that we're feeding to grow the meditation, right? So things like letting go, things like focusing on the positive elements of our experience, right? Things like finding and being curious, investigating the subtle things. So all of these different conditions, they kind of weave together to actually finally create the meditation. So finding out which one works for you. But when you notice that the mind is gone, then really just coming back, breathing, feeling that rest, feeling that ground, feeling that peacefulness, feel the body sitting here, right? Smile a little bit, relax, let go. This is your time to enjoy yourself. This is your time to be peaceful. This isn't your time to be doing and pushing and frustrating yourself. This is really time to just be here, right? This is a small pocket of time during the day where we're allowed just to be, right? So really let that happen, enjoy it, allow yourself to get out of the way, right? Allow it to kind of start happening by itself. Allow it to feel good. And every time you start getting carried away, allow it to feel good again. And you get carried away, focus on the space. Carried away, focused on the body. Carried away, focused on the breath. And eventually, it's all just going to start slowing down. It's going to start just happening all by itself. And you can really just drop in and rest, and it feels great. And once you know the way in, you'll never forget. Yeah, once you've learned, like riding a bicycle, once you know the way in, no matter what the mind is doing, you know the way back there. And that's why we practice. That's why it's called mind training, right? It's not like throwing darts blindfolded. We're actually training the mind to familiarize, to get back to this place whenever it wants to. And that only happens by doing it again and again and again. And learning the tools, learning the qualities, the conditions to cultivate that bring us there, so that anytime we want, we can drop back in. Okay? So that's my talk for today. See you in the meditation. And yeah, thanks for being a part of this group.